Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about all the books that I have read in August for the Magical Readathon. So I hope you're ready because we have quite a few books to get through. Now, the first book I finished in August was Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig, and this is kind of a horror, kind of dystopian, apocalyptic kind of thriller book, somewhere in between them all. And in this one we are following our main character who lives on a res. He's kind of like a handyman. He goes around fixing things, and one day in their community everything is gone. Like there's no phones, no electricity and stuff like that, and they don't really know why. They don't really have a lot of contact to other people. They live in a very remote region in Canada, so for a while they're not quite sure what is going on, but they have prepared for a scenario like that, so they just keep things running as good as they can. And then one day people come to their community and tell them that it's basically kind of like an apocalypse, like everything's gone and nobody knows what's happening now. So this one I did really enjoy. I did a reading vlog with 3 kind of like horror thriller books written by Native American authors, and so I talked about this one in more detail there. Overall I gave it 3.5 stars, and I think that I did really enjoy the overall setup of the story, but just because I've heard so much about it, my expectations were very different from what I got. This is a very slow moving story where we kind of have this like creeping dread of what's gonna happen with this community and this family that we're following, and I was just expecting something more action-packed, and so it was just a little bit different than I thought, and that's always very sad because I feel like I'm not really judging the book with an open mind because of the things I've heard before. But yeah, I would still recommend it if you're interested in these kind of apocalyptic scenarios, and also if you're interested in kind of like indigenous mythology in the Americas. Then the next book I finished, I read the whole trilogy, and the first book was Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is a fantasy series where we are following a girl who is basically a thief, and she has some kind of abilities that we learn is because she has a metal plate in her head with some magical scribings that give her powers. And we follow this girl Sancha as she's trying to steal something very, very valuable. But when she gets it, she realizes that it is kind of a powerful weapon, so she doesn't want to hand it over to the wrong people, and that sets her on a very dangerous path where she's trying to keep this weapon from dangerous people. And yeah, this sets off a whole array of things. This world is so cool because we have this magic that is very scientific. We have these scribings who are basically like commands you can write on things, so they kind of forget reality, or they're just like kind of confused about reality. So for example, with like arrows or bullets, you can write on them that they're confused, so that they think they're falling down when in reality they are falling forward in a way, so they are much faster than a usual arrow would be, for example. We have this world that is very divided. Sancha is from an area where she lived in slavery, so that is also something that is discussed in here. And then she lives in this very poor area of this city, and there are these big kind of like campos, like districts that are privately owned by rich families, and they basically rule this world. I really enjoyed the series overall, but the first book just wasn't quite what I expected because I am a character-driven reader, and with the first book I felt like we didn't get enough of insight into the characters. We do get quite a good grasp on Sancha, but we have a lot of characters around her that are also very important for the series, and I felt like I didn't really get to know them as well as I wanted to. So I gave this first book a weak 4-star, so more like a 3.75, but I still was intrigued to continue on with this series. And so the next book I finished was actually Shorefall, the second book in this series. And that one I enjoyed so much more. We have a very, very different setup. We also have a bit of a time jump. I think it's around 3 years between the first and the second book. So we do see these characters in very different circumstances, and I really like the development that we get with that, and I like that we have more of a kind of like found family setting in the second one, which is something I love reading about. And just overall, I felt like I just got to know these characters so much better. I learned to really care for them, and I also really liked the villain that we get introduced to in this second book, who's also much more present, because in the first book we have more of a mystery of what's going on. We don't really see a villain there, but in the second book we have more or less a clear villain character, and I enjoyed him a lot. And so that one I gave 4.5 stars. And then lastly, I also finished the third book, which was Locklands by Bennett, and that one basically stole my heart. Again, we have quite a big time jump between the books. I think it is 8 years between book 2 and 3, and we have again very, very different circumstances for our characters, which I completely can't talk about because so much spoilers. But the world has changed drastically from what we had seen before. There is a kind of new way to use scrivings that has transformed how society works, but we also have two very, very powerful evil entities. And the interesting thing in the third book is that basically all the players want to change the world for the better, but just the definition of what that means very, very different between these three parties, like our good sides that we're following and then these two evil entities. But I just loved all the reveals. I loved how it just came together in the end, and I just loved how there was something like so sweet and tender, and also something so hopeful about this last book, about society. And I also really loved the author's note, because this last book was written during the pandemic, and Bennett commented a little bit on that as well, and I really, really enjoyed that. So I actually gave this last book 5 stars, and it's one of the best books I've read this year. So yeah, total win with this series. I'm so happy I managed to read all of that in August. Then the next like big fantasy book that I finished was my audiobook, Bone Short Emperor by Andrea Stewart. This is the second book in the Drowning Empire series, and in this one we are following mainly 2 characters. We are following Lynn, who is the daughter of the emperor, and we're following Jovis, who is a smuggler. And in this world we basically have this like island empire, so we have lots of smaller islands, and they are all ruled by governors, but there is like one emperor who rules them all basically. And Lynn, as I said, is his daughter, and in the first book she's trying to finally reach his approval so that he will announce that she will follow him as being the next emperor basically. And she's competing against her kind of like adoptive brother, I guess. And with Jovis we have a smuggler character who he's not trying to, but he's like a really good guy, so he gets sucked into helping a lot of people. And so he is on an island that starts sinking, hence the Drowning Empire series, and he can narrowly escape together with a child, and when they do, they also rescue something that at first they think is a kitten, but it turns out it is something much more interesting, and it is called Meffy, and it is adorable. It's a pet companion, and yeah, that is the first book. I can't tell you what happens in the second book because of massive spoilers, but we're basically following these characters for more adventures, I guess. I am enjoying this series, but I feel like I expected a lot more from it because I've heard so much praise about it, and it's just fine. There is unfortunately quite a bit in this book that I don't enjoy because again we get kind of a new villain introduced in the second book, and I don't like it. I don't like that kind of character, and I don't enjoy that we have to have chapters from the villain's point of view because I just get frustrated. And so that was a little bit sad and definitely annoying. So whenever we had a chapter from that perspective, I would just roll my eyes and hope that it would be over very quickly. We also have another couple, like two women who are together that we also get perspectives from, and they're a little bit rare, but it seems like that changes from book to book also a little bit, how important they are for the story. But yeah, overall it's a fine series, and I gave the second book, as I did the first one, just 4 stars. It's good, it's solid. I don't think you can go wrong with it. Then the next book I finished was my manga. This is Cheese Sweet Home Volume 7, so I am quite a bit of a way through this series. I don't know how many there are, like 12 or something. And this is just a kind of middle grade manga series about a small cat called Chi. And in the first volume, Chi kind of loses her family. They're there one moment and then gone the next one, and she doesn't know where they went, she can't find them, but then she gets adopted by this family who also have a small toddler. And at first they're trying to hide Chi because they're technically not allowed to have pets, and then in the later volumes they actually move to a different flat where they can have Chi out in the open, and that's where we are at in volume 7. And this was cute, this was very sweet. We just followed Chi on all of her like cat shenanigans, and it's adorable, so I gave this one 3 stars. Then I also finished this book. This is called Deutsche Heldensagen, so it's basically German legends, and it was written by Gretel and Wolfgang Hecht. And this is a collection of, I think, 5 big legends from like the 5th and 6th century, somewhere around that. And so, for example, we have the legend of the Nibelung in here, which is basically one of the influences of Lord of the Rings, and it's probably why I stole this book from my mom as a teenager, and then ever since had it on my bookshelves but never completely read it. Like, I know I read the Legend of the Nibelung before, but I don't think I've ever read the other ones that are in here. But since I needed a book with a shield on a cover, and that is a hard thing to find, I finally read this completely, and it was very interesting. I really liked the afterword that is in here, and I wished it would have been a foreword or just sprinkled throughout the book as notes, because I thought the like extra information on these legends was more interesting than reading the legends themselves, just because they are very repetitive, because they are not meant to be read as a consecutive stories, but they were kind of like told in vignettes, so it just goes around and around and around. You have the same kind of tropes popping up again and again and again. So yeah, it was a little bit boring to read, but I really liked the information we get at the end. So overall, I gave it 2.5 stars, but if you are interested in legends, why not pick them up? Then I also finished my next audiobook, which was Chlorine by Jade. This is a literary fiction leaning into some body horror, and in this one we are following a Chinese American girl, Ren, as she is a swimmer and athlete, and she from a very young age is very convinced that she really is a mermaid. And so we get told her story basically as she becomes a mermaid. And we start with her being a small girl carrying around this book of legends about mermaids, which are pretty much very, very gruesome. But since her parents don't really read the stuff they give to her, they think it's like cutesy mermaid stories, but it's actually not. And then we just see her like family. Her father decides to migrate back to China after a while because he feels like he can't really get the respect that he wants in the United States. And so Rin and her mother stay behind. And yeah, it's just about her life, about her teenage years, about the swimming, about the pressure that you have when you are an athlete in the American system, and all of that. And it was very interesting. I really, really enjoyed the book up until the ending. And when it gets into the kind of horror-y bits with the becoming the mermaid thing, I just don't understand these things so well. I'm not always very sure what they're trying to tell me. I mean, I do a little bit, but I just don't know. Sometimes I feel I'm just too stupid for these kinds of books. So in the end, I gave it 3.5 stars. I think it is interesting. Enjoyable would be the wrong word, but if you enjoy the books that typically show up on the hot girl book lists on Goodreads, then you will enjoy this book, and I would recommend. Then I finished my last physical read, which was A Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. This is a book that I have been excited to read for so many years. I loved Everything I Never Told You by the author, so I was so excited to read the second book she wrote, and then I never did. But now it is done, and this is kind of I don't know, also like kind of a literary fiction, but leaning into a mystery thriller, I guess. And we are following this perfect community where everything is perfect and regulated. It was really interesting because I had never heard of this religious group before that this community is supposedly based on. So it was interesting to read up about that a little bit. And we're following two families. We have a very wealthy white family, I think the Richardsons, and they are mother, father, and then 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And we have a single mom and her daughter who rent the wealthy family's like extra flat that they have. And we follow at the beginning these 2 families as they get more and more entwined, especially the children, because they all go to the same school, and there is some friendships forming and maybe some more forming as well. And then we have quite a way into the book, we have an incident where one of the friends of the Richardson family, they're trying to adopt a Chinese baby, but the Chinese mother wants her baby back. She made a mistake in giving her up and she wants her daughter back. And this Chinese woman is a colleague of the single mom that we are following in this book. So basically these 2 families that we have been looking at get kind of pitched against each other because of this adoption case. This is very interesting if you like diving deep into families, into their secrets. And I think that Celeste Ng just has the best writing style. I ate it up, I loved it, and I can't wait to read the next book by Celeste Ng, to be honest. And I gave this one 5 stars. And then the very last book I finished was a reread for me, and that is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And I also am doing a little bit of a project there, so you will see that pop up on my channel again, hopefully this year, sometime soon, I don't know. But yeah, this was a reread. This is a classic from the 50s, I think, and we are following a man called Guy Montag, and he is a firefighter, but in this kind of dystopian world, firefighters are actually there to burn books. And that is his job, and he's quite good at it until one day he meets a mysterious girl who is their neighbor's daughter, and she starts asking him questions that kind of get stuck in his head and might turn his whole life around. And I love this book. I really enjoyed the reread. The English audiobook was really great. I would definitely recommend. And yeah, it's just a story that I really like, and from all the like dystopian classics that I've read, this is by far my favorite one, because it deals with like scholarship, intellectuals, people, how media consumption can influence people. It also has kind of like this theme of like cancel culture, even though that now is quite a new term, but you can definitely see that this is part of it too, even though probably a little bit different than we would discuss it today. But I still think that the overall idea is, it rings very true in a way, even though it's not quite as bad as in the book. So I gave it 4.5 stars, and I really like this book. So that was my Aurelium reading for the autumn equinox. With that, I achieved my Archmage level again, which I'm very happy about. I think that finishes my second year of this career choice, of this calling. And yeah, I have the best time with this readathon. I already can't wait for April to roll around to get back into it. And if you participated as well, let me know which calling you went for and whether you achieved all of the reading for it. And if you didn't participate, let me know what your favorite book of the month was. I would love to hear about that. And leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye!